It's time for the Unofficial 40. SoonerScoop.com's very official recruiting podcast featuring SoonerScoop.com recruiting publisher Josh McCuistion. Get your recruiting fix from the leader in Sooner recruiting. It's the Unofficial 40 with your hosts, SoonerScoop.com publishers Carey Murdoch and Josh McCuistion.
All right, welcome back. It is another episode of the Unofficial 40, the very unofficial recruiting podcast from SoonerScoop.com, as we welcome in, once again, Josh McCuistion, who is joining us from his home base, Eddie Radosevich and Joe Duvall. And guys, I guess the big thing that we want to talk about here, we've had a couple of commitments since we last talked. One a recommitment, and then we've got the big barbecue coming up here on the 29th. So Sooners got a lot of activity heading into the opener.
Yeah, they really do. You know, this is I was kind of talking about it in the story that I had about Levi Draper earlier today. Oklahoma's always busy in the summer, especially when it comes to like commitments. But you guys know, I mean, usually it comes down to, okay, you have the camps in the early summer, kind of early June, and then not a lot of, activities, not a lot of stuff that's really happening to kind of keep momentum going. So it's almost like they have to pick up some steam right at the beginning of the season to get things going. And this year it hasn't happened, between the 5-star challenge and then on to the opening. And now with this barbecue, Oklahoma really gets to head into two-a-days when guys can come visit. And I know some guys are already making those kind of plans with a lot of momentum, not just from guys that are committed, but, from guys that are those elite national players that they're still trying to reel in.
I get the impression this barbecue thing, it's the first year that Bob and the coaching staff have done something like this. I get the feeling or the impression that it's going to be somewhat of a informal type thing, but also at the same time kind of a formal thing, in that you have so many guys coming that are already committed in the 2017 class that I feel like it's just a good situation and kind of a good momentum builder for Oklahoma to kind of answer that.
Yeah, it almost feels like one of those things where it's so simple that you almost wonder how come it wasn't thought of before. I mean, it's just a great idea to get as many of these recruits as you can in an informal environment around your coaches and recruits and commitments and current players, and see them in a relaxed environment, make them feel comfortable in your city where you want them to come and play and around the people they're going to be around. And it not only is it just such a simple, easy idea, it's a great way to get some relationships formed to maybe solidify something that you can hold on to for the rest of the recruiting class.
Well, I think it's also an opportunity to get guys into the stadium. I mean, it's further along than I'm trying to think. I guess when Hayes was here, that's probably is that the last really big recruit they've had in here? So it's been a couple of weeks now.
2.5, 3 weeks.
2.5, 3 weeks since and there's been a lot of progress done on the interior of the stadium. And Josh, maybe you can chime in on this. I was told from the beginning this would be like they'll be doing it on the field inside the stadium, the barbecue part of it.
Yeah, that's that's the thing that's been a little fuzzy to me, is exactly how this thing will play out. Because like I said, it's you guys were talking about it. This is also new to not just, the fans and the recruits and the coaches, but to us. I mean, this is not something we've been around before. It's kind of going to be interesting to see how the coaches handle this. Are they going to be kind of hands off and let this be about the kids being around each other? Because I think the thing that gets talked about but maybe isn't focused on enough is it's not coincidence that this 2017 group seems really close as a committed group, and at the same time is also off to the best start, in Oklahoma's recruiting history. These guys are good recruiters. They're involved with it. They know each other. And so many of the guys that are coming in this weekend either know them or have some relationship, met them at a camp, whatever it is. So I think that's going to be really interesting to see how much do the coaches kind of push up and, kind of know those right moments to get their pitch in, and then at the same time let it be a relaxed atmosphere and not make it so much about, we got to get commitments, but more about, we want these guys to continue to want to be around the program.
And that stuff's going to happen naturally. I mean, these guys are, they're 18, 17-year-old kids. They're going to be hanging out, talking to each other. You're going to have, a handful, if not more, commits on campus. You're going to have Robert Barnes and Calcaterra and Trey Brown and Broyles and guys that were just in the opening together. and spent a lot of time together. You're going to have Marquise Hayes and Sedarian Lamb, who are going to be really jacked about Oklahoma after committing recently. So you're going to have just natural enthusiasm for the program throughout all these conversations. And so, yeah, while you do maybe Oklahoma seems to have, put the pressure on kids maybe a little more to get these commits early to jump in, but they don't have to. That'll just be there. That excitement, that call to join the class, I think it comes naturally to that class of 2017.
Do you think there'll be any vegetarians?
It's a Quino.
That would be awkward. I think that if there are, you should just pull their offer on spot and have like a show them the we used to call it the fourth room, which was the exit at the fraternity house. But during rush, you'd be shown the fourth room if you didn't fly.
It'd be hard to get out of the stadium without a tour guide, though.
Isn't Arian Foster now a vegetarian? Is that something you can do? And I'm poor at nutrition. Obviously, we're probably
He's
the wrong
a bad
guys to ask.
example of what happens when you go vegetarian. Is
Well,
he
look at
blaming all
Prince
of his
Fielder.
injuries?
I mean, you can clearly be of a certain body type and be a vegetarian.
He's not a vegetarian.
Well, I mean,
I guarantee
all I
you,
know
that dude
of the
is-
guy,
that
he makes
dude is-
many a claim.
He's eating butter. He's eating eggs.
If I were vegetarian, I would just eat pasta nonstop, and I would weigh 400 pounds. I don't think vegetarian necessarily correlates
Yeah,
with
see,
anything.
I get lost in the verbiage, the vegan and the vegetarian. Like, I don't know I don't know the subtle little differences from one to the next. I can't keep track of it.
Well, that's the whole thing. Like with eggs, like that was going to be a living thing, so it's okay to eat it. That doesn't make sense to me. That's still murder.
That should be a question that's at the Democrat National Convention.
Oh God, we're not going there. All right, let's talk about the guys that are coming in. 2017, the committed guys. I mean, we all got the list up, and Josh, you've been doing a great job of keeping everybody updated. I know it's been changing and morphing, and you've been chasing things down, but the latest kind of developments, Josh, for the guys coming in for the barbecue right now. What are they?
Well, I think what's kind of interesting to see is, in 2017, people keep asking me, oh, who are the new names? Who are the new offers? When you look around, I mean, if I'm Oklahoma, I feel pretty good about where I'm at. Maybe I don't know exactly who's going to fill my spots, but I know that in all likelihood, the offers I have out will account for a good portion of my class. I don't see Oklahoma having to take a whole bunch of chances around signing day and having to fill out for guys that they lost out on or whatever. Now, don't get me wrong, it's going to happen. There'll be a guy that decommits or that there'll be something. I mean, this stuff is all too fluid for something not to change. But for me, what I'm watching is 2018, because 2017, you look at it, it's a whole bunch of OU commitments, and then guys like Omar Manning and Kenneth Murray, Taquan Graham, the big defensive end, that I think is kind of an interesting story. But there's not a ton of uncommitted guys in 2017 that'll be there. But like I said, that's for good reason, because a good portion of OU's class is already accounted for, and there's a lot of other guys that they're recruiting from around the country that are just not going to be able to make it into something like this. But 2018, you see multiple guys. You got Cole Blanton coming up from Houston, the big offensive tackle. Daryl Simpson, another offensive tackle from the Fort Worth area, that it's crazy to think that there are guys out there that can, make a guy like Bray Walker look small. But Daryl Simpson's that kind of guy. He is a massive human being. And, you look at him, obviously Bray Walker will be there. Josh Moore, a wide receiver offer. Josh Proctor, the safety offer from Owasso. 2018 is what I'm really interested to see, because I want to see if Oklahoma can start to develop that momentum. I think we all saw the story that, God, it's going to sound really bad. It sounds like I'm tooting my horn here. But the Cameron Rising story that we had earlier this week, and he seemed really pretty high on Oklahoma, and there's a lot of talk that maybe he's thinking about committing. Well, if you look back at 2017, that's really how 2017 got rolling, was Chris Robinson got on board, and then Oklahoma just kind of gathered momentum from there. I think that's what they're wanting to see happen here with Rising, and if that can happen, and then you start to maybe make a move on some of these guys this weekend, maybe land a Josh Proctor this weekend, maybe surprise a lot of people and get Verone McKinley, the Rivals 100 corner. You do some things like that, and then 2018 is off to a very similar start to where 2017 was, that now has you sitting at, the number 3 class in the country.
Yeah, and with 2017, guys, if you're worrying about who's OU's going to offer next, they're sitting kind of waiting now on a lot of elite guys. They've built up numbers. They've got a lot of 4-stars already committed, so now they can wait on guys like on the defensive line, Marvin Wilson or Chase On from Houston, or they can sit and wait on Jacob Phillips out of Nashville at linebacker. And so you're right, turning your attention to 2018, these are guys that not only could be Oklahoma leans after this, but they're people that Oklahoma has been working for a while, have built a relationship with. Daryl Simpson's been up to Norman before. Josh Proctor's been to Norman multiple times. We've seen Patrick Fields before. I mean, he's somebody who's a very good player at Union. He could even get an offer this weekend. So, and Joshua Moore, someone we saw in Atlanta, who's a elite receiver in the Texas area. So these are relationships with elite guys early in that class that could really build off of. I mean, starting off hot again next year.
It'll be really interesting to see what happens with Patrick Fields, just in that he's coming off of a weekend, and that he did he visit Fort Worth and then receive an offer down there, Josh?
Yeah, he camped down there.
Okay, and that'll be interesting to see if they react to that.
I think it's probably going to be good too when you got a guy like Josh Proctor. He's got commits that are in the secondary. Jordan Austin. He'll have Justin Broyles, Robert Barnes. I mean, those guys can work him a little bit. And I mean, Josh, I'd love you to chime in where you think Josh is right now. But I know Mike Stoops loves him. I know Kerry Cooks loves him. They've done as much as they can to be around him as much as they can up to this point. But do you see what is the thought process with Proctor at this early in his recruitment?
Well, he's always been pretty open that just about every time he comes to Norman, he admits that the thought kind of crosses his mind to commit. He likes it there. He's obviously more comfortable there than he is at any other school. I do think he took a trip up to Ohio State right before the 5-star, the junior combine that we had that same weekend as the 5-star challenge. And I think it definitely opened his eyes a little bit. Not so much that Ohio State surpassed Oklahoma, but just that there are other great programs out there. There are other places that might have some things he likes. So I think that caught his attention to some degree and maybe kind of had him tap the brakes. But I think you guys touched on a great, a point that there are so many defensive backs that are going to be there, and they're a good group of guys. They're guys that I think he'll relate to. He gets around Justin Broyles. I think, Justin Broyles can get anybody to talk. So I think that's going to be very, very natural for him to kind of fit into that group. The player, some of the things that I'm interested to see is if any of the local players are going to be around. I mean, obviously they've left, workouts aren't going on right now, but is a guy like Stephen Parker going to be down there? To me, Stephen Parker and Josh Proctor, they won't be. Or did I hear? Yeah, I heard something.
No, I'm just saying. Yeah, you've got a great point. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
there's just so many things we're unclear on. Like I know Josh, you and I were talking earlier today. Like I think OU can pay for the spread and everything and feed them, and I don't think that's. I think they get the NCAA must have some kind of a exemption or exception or something, because otherwise people wouldn't be doing this. I mean,
I would imagine that guys start rolling back into Norman on Friday. If they're reporting on Tuesday, they usually come back through the week this weekend, and it's kind of their last hoorah. And I imagine that's something holding it on a Friday evening that most guys will get back to.
Yeah, I would say most people won't be here, though. I mean, I don't think they'll have to check in until a couple of days before the first workout. So
Tuesday,
they have what
Thursday.
they do is it'll be the 4th that they'll be their first practice, but they have that big orientation meeting on the 3rd, and that's usually the day. The 2nd and the 3rd guys have been coming in pretty steadily then.
Yeah, I think maybe Parker, though, a guy being from Tulsa, would probably come down. Yeah. Maybe a guy like Charles Walker that has a kid still down in Dallas, I would think that he probably stays through Monday at home and then comes back.
Now, to be clear, Eddie, the last hurrah, that's like warm milk and cookies, right? Like that's what you're getting at, is the guys are going to be in bed early and just focusing on the season and visualizing, a national championship. Is that what that's about?
I wouldn't be surprised to see the Uber surcharge return this weekend in Norman, is what I'm saying.
By the way, here's something else too. I mean, this 2018 class, you're talking about a lot of kids from Texas that are coming in. To me, you have a real opportunity with this class because Texas still questions about Charlie Strong. You have Baylor, that's just a complete mess.
Baylor's not my problem.
You just have TCU that is the other big boy around.
TCU's my problem.
So it seems like a great time for Oklahoma to make an impression with some of those 2018 kids this weekend.
I don't think there's any doubt. And, I was kind of looking over the list here. And, whether you go 2017 or 2018, the thing that's kind of amazing is maybe what Oklahoma is starting to set up. You look at Robert Barnes from South Lake Carroll, powerhouse. Trey Brown from Tulsa Union, powerhouse. Jordan Austin, cornerback in 2018, Lancaster. I mean, that's a school that just a few years ago was in the state championship game in Texas. So, I mean, you kind of look around and you see guys that are at programs that are going to continue to produce talent. And what does that kind of set up? Again, it's such an overused term in recruiting, but I think it's because it's so valid. I mean, momentum is a huge thing. And so if Oklahoma can kind of move that success again from recruiting to on the field, and that can carry over, I see such potential for this 2018 class to get going again, if for no other reason than because the state of Oklahoma in 2018 is so good that if you can lock down those top 4 or 5 guys in state early on, it's kind of like what we're looking at here with the barbecue. You're like, oh man, there's all these great players coming in. Well, yeah, most of them are commitments. So, I mean, it's not like you're doing something massive here, but because those commitments are so good, the weekend looks so good. So if you can lock down your state early, your class looks really good, and all you've done is kind of protect your borders, which is something Oklahoma should do. So it's kind of interesting to see just how this stuff can start to move forward, as 2018 is, to me, is probably as much, if not more, interesting than 2017 right now.
And 2018, you start to get into kind of what Carey's was getting at, where you had a few years where Baylor and Texas A&M really were the hot schools in Texas for guys to go to, and now you have obviously the Baylor scandal and Texas A&M falling off a little bit. There's a vacuum there in the state of Texas, and 2018 really is that kind of first opportunity where teams can pounce, and it'll be interesting to see if Oklahoma can reap the dividends off of that and kind of return to more of the early 2000s style of locking down the borders in Oklahoma and locking down Texas, and maybe have a less of a national approach in 2018 if they can get a hot start in Oklahoma and Texas. And also, I think it'd be interesting to see if they can get Darrell Simpson locked down early. I mean, Bray Walker and Darrell Simpson, that's 2 bookend possible high 4-star, possibly 5-star type tackles with size that you just don't get very often. That would be huge too. I mean, that's almost like getting a quarterback that early in the process, getting 2 elite guys like that.
I think they've already started kind of doing that in 2017 even. You look at all the guys that they have. That's a who's who list from the OK Prep scene that they already have committed, and I think getting them down here on Saturday. I think you guys hit it on the head earlier, too, that this should be a event that Justin Broyles absolutely shines at. I'd like to have – I'd like to put a GoPro on his head and just see how active he is on Friday night when he's going around talking to everybody.
I'd do it if you asked him.
I'd give a couple of Fitbits so who takes the most steps. I got my money on Broyles.
He'll be up near 20,000 probably for the night.
Is there a way, is there like the Fitbit for words? Like, I feel like Broyles he's going to walk, but it's the mouth that's going to win the award. I mean, like that dude will talk
Fitbit.
Twice as much as anybody else.
I don't think it works that way. But it'd be a cool invention.
He could have a person on his back like in that Chappelle show the one time when the husband has the
wrap it up.
Yeah, no, the rider on the back, and he turns around and the wife's like, "Well, what are you talking about?" And he has the guy read everything off.
The human stenograph.
The human stenograph.
The stenographer,
or stenographer.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of the Chappelle show, I did read an article today. I can't remember. It was on the Undefeated, the new ESPN site. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I tweeted that it'll be the best thing.
The guy confirmed that the Game Blouses skit went down exactly as it was described on the Chappelle show.
I tweeted earlier, it's the best thing you'll read all day, and I stand by that. It is amazing. It's by Jerry Bembry on the Undefeated.
What was the guy's name?
The guy that they interviewed?
Yeah.
Mickey Free.
Mickey Free, yeah. And basically, he just said that he was a baller, and all the stuff that was described exactly exactly right. Even the part about his chef making blueberry pancakes after it was all
the
over.
way down to the pancakes. It's so awesome.
Well, and Murphy said it in the show. He's like, there's a lot of really talented writers out there. I'm not that guy. Like, how can I make this up? Like, and I think that's why it felt real, because you're like, who the hell would make that up? It was so off the wall from beginning to end.
And apparently, like, Prince was on this team in Minneapolis that was like the number one team in the country. And so he didn't play that much, and he got frustrated and he quit. But he said if he would have been at any other school, he would have been a starter, like a 5'2" point. He said he was like Spud Webb, but he just couldn't jump as high.
Yeah, his high school team in 1975-76 went 25-1, and 4 of the 5 starters went D1, including his half brother Dwayne Nelson, who signed with the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
So yeah, a little
Beautiful.
side note. I put out a thing on our message boards just saying that we were recording this. I actually screwed it up, so I had to edit it. I said, here was my subject line. We're recruiting a new recruiting podcast right now. I meant to say recording. I changed that. So we are getting the long-winded, terrible for radio questions. Like, I think people, they're being nice. I don't want to rip on anybody, but I guess I am already. But
Too late.
There was an interesting question from Dalden Soul. He wanted to know what our favorite barbecue places were in Oklahoma, and the favorite barbecue places you've experienced in your travels. Eddie and I don't really go for the barbecue that much. Like, we go for, like, people are going to laugh. We go for, like, Boston Market stuff you can't get in Oklahoma.
You know why, though? Is because I feel like Oklahoma has the best barbecue.
They have really good barbecue. You're a fan of Ray's, right?
I think Ray's is the number one barbecue spot that I eat at religiously, I guess is the best way to put it. I think it's really, really good.
It's really good.
The Rays is good. Iron Star's good.
Iron Star is really good. It's just froofy.
Yeah, it's different.
it's a
But their
different
mac
type.
and cheese is killer.
yeah.
I was destroyed when the one went out of business in Norman,
The jalapeno.
Oh, yeah,
cornbread,
on Kemp's
too.
Corner.
where Blackbird is.
Forget
now.
about
Yeah.
that.
The jalapeno cornbread too is just. I mean,
I don't like jalapenos in my cornbread. I just like plain cornbread. I'll say I'll put Vans up against anywhere.
yeah. I was
mean,
gonna. In high school, I used to my friends and I would go eat at Vans every Tuesday, and we would take down like one of those things of barbecue sauce. They would have to put out a new one after we were
like
there.
they have that Dickies here in Norman now over on. It's terrible. Like
Not a
those
Dickies
are all
guy.
over in Texas.
Joe and I
we just
actually
had
had
this
this conversation on the way home from Big 12 Media Day. I feel like there's something different in the Dickies in Dallas and the Dickies
Like
in
it's so much better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's a complete different type of produce almost. It's really weird. Because I've eaten at one in Dallas and it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad. It was different though.
Yeah, I was telling Eddie I worked a game down here once and we got fed Dickies, and it was actually really surprisingly good. I love the potato salad, but I do not eat it normally.
But it is strange. Like it's like I think there's great Mexican food in Norman and great barbecue, but it's like in Oklahoma City, is there really like a great barbecue place? There's that one that's out like on Route 66 now that everybody's talking about.
Yeah, the one that like you have to get there before 11 a.m. to get the burn-ins.
Yeah, it's like
and
a
stuff.
Franklin's kind of type joint.
I
But
still need to go out there.
There are very few places like that. I mean, I think everybody loved the what was the train car place?
Bedlam?
Up by where the the museum is, County Line.
Oh, County Line.
County Line.
that
That's
was
right.
pretty good.
Yeah.
I think that's still around in some form or fashion.
Yeah, it's a.
But it was just
now.
okay. I mean, it wasn't like you hear all the places in Austin like Franklin's, and I think the original Salt Lick place is pretty good.
It's awesome.
I mean, Josh, there's got to be a ton of barbecue places in Houston.
The one in Houston for me, and I'm a barbecue fan, but I'm not like over the top. But if one of the ones that I really love is Killen's. It's a place. It just happens to be in the town that Tiffany and I moved into when we moved down here in the Pearland area, kind of southwest Houston, and we it started off as a steak place, and just this guy, and he's a master chef, and it's this little bitty hole in the wall steak place. But I kid you not, if you go there 2 or 3 Saturday nights in a row, you will see JJ Watt. Like, he eats there religiously. And so, you'll run into, you run into you hear stories like James Harden and Dwight Howard. Like, I mean, and it's not like
I'd be there all the time,
$400 a plate or something.
hoping
It's
to
not
run into
crazy.
Lindsey Vaughn.
Yeah, it's just really good. Well, the guy went ahead and opened up a barbecue joint, and it's the same deal you guys are talking about, where if you're not there by like 10:30 standing in line, you won't eat until like 12:45. Like, I mean, it's crazy.
Well, and that's what I was talking to Andy Staples at Big 12 Media Day, and we were both waiting for a car. And I just said something like, "So I guess you're not going to barbecue." He's like, "No." He said, "I don't go to any barbecue place that is open this late in the day." Like, so that's pretty standard across the country.
What a bar to set. I don't go to barbecue if it's at 6 o'clock.
It was 6 o'clock. Yeah, we were going to
That's pretty important.
Rodeo Goat or something. Don't go there.
That's a pretty big power move.
Well, I mean, he's been to the best barbecue.
Yeah.
Like, I remember Mark Rogers was talking about like Dixieland to George Schroeder one day, and George was like, "That's the McDonald's of barbecue," because like there's so many other places in Alabama to go. That's like Dixieland is like it's like the McDonald's of barbecue. It's just it's a marketing deal.
Yeah.
It's not real barbecue.
Yeah, you need to be a little uncomfortable when you're getting barbecued. Like Arthur Bryant's in Kansas City is the best place I've ever eaten barbecue, and you're like on edge because you're kind of shuffled through a huge line, and everybody knows exactly what to order. You have to kind of yell out the same thing, and so but those places always give you the best food.
Well, Eddie and I have been to the original Oklahoma Joe's.
That was bomb.
And that's awesome.
It's really, really good.
That's really good stuff.
There's one other place I was thinking of in Oklahoma City. It used to be over by Douglas High School. It was called Tom's. It was right off of I-44.
Uh-huh.
Very, very good, but I don't think it's open anymore.
I will say, for people that live in Tulsa, Elmer's, and I don't think I've ever taken you to Elmer's. I think we tried to go to Elmer's one time and it was closed. But Elmer's on Peoria, you go south if you're on 44 or north if you're on 44, it is. They do like they have the best potato salad I've ever had in my entire life. Like they don't have like chunks of potato, they like whip it up so it's like mashed potato salad. It's fantastic.
Great question, Dalton Soul.
But I got a sub question for Carey because this made me think of something. If there's any place in the state that you could live, Carey, just on the food, I feel like it would be Tulsa. Is that right? I feel like you love Tulsa food, like the Coney Islander, like all that stuff. And I feel like every time you talk about food, it usually ends up in Tulsa.
I do like Ricardo's, little Mexican place.
Oh, was that in Tulsa?
Yeah. It's in a strip mall. It's pretty good. That's why I'm fat, Josh. I like food. I'll eat food anyway. I'll find the food. Like in Norman, I love like Tulio's and Tarahumara's or however you say it. I mean, I love the Mama Vaches over by Lowe's.
Oh, yeah,
We have really good. I mean, you don't have to go to Ted's. Ted's is so
I'd
average.
say that's on the bottom side.
Yeah, Ted's is average.
Tarahumara is one of the few places in Oklahoma that I think holds up next to the good places in Houston. I mean, Houston Mexican food is just like unbelievable. It's just good stuff.
Trust me, I haven't
everywhere.
even been to El Tiempo, and you know how much I drool over Guadalajara. What is it?
Yep.
Guadalajara Cantina.
El Tiempo is like, and I'm not that way about food. Like food is what I need to keep moving. Like I don't get that giddy about food. El Tiempo is like life-changing Mexican food. It's really good.
I had a fraternity brother. I think it was is El Tiempo over on by Alameda. Is that
Yeah, it's over
in that shopping center right there.
Yeah. It's right off 59, like by a big Costco.
I used to drink there underage. It was awesome.
That a kid.
Well, let's hope the Houston PD is not listening to this.
Jeez, Eddie. Just make us a bunch of criminals on this show.
No, if I wanted to do that, I'd tell you the step-to-step guide on how to steal beer from Walmart, but that can be a different podcast.
Nobody else on this show has ever drank underage, Eddie. We cannot discuss this.
All
right. People are screaming at their computers and their iPods and their cars right now.
Talk sports.
Yeah.
Damn you people. Go back to your shanties.
See, Josh hates it when I play that because I made that joke on the board one time, and I think everyone threatened to cancel their subscriptions. I think that was the beginning of my art phase, I think. Okay, back to the barbecue. We talked about the guys that are committed. Josh, let's throw it out there. What are the possibilities of a commitment this weekend at the event?
I think they're really good. To me, the only question is if Xavier Newman makes that trip. Now, I talked to somebody last night. was given the impression that he has told people at Oklahoma he will be there. He has not confirmed that to me, but from everything I can gather, Oklahoma expects him to be there. And if he comes, I think a flip from his Texas commitment to OU is imminent. I think that's just really been, for a few weeks, been a matter of him making that trip up. And if he comes up, is around all those guys. And, I talked to Robert Barnes following the opening, and he talked about Newman being around the guys a lot. He spent a lot of time with the OU commitments, and you got the impression that they felt like he really kind of fit in with what they wanted to do and what they, kind of are as a group. And so I think Oklahoma feels very good about him. Now, the one that's kind of quiet that I really want to see is Adrian Ealy, the offensive tackle from New Orleans. I don't think it's far-fetched that a commitment could happen. I think he really doesn't want it to. I think he wants to be patient. But at the same time, I think Oklahoma is considerably out in front of the field right now. So if something happens, it wouldn't shock me. But at the same time, he's a guy that would commit and probably take some trips if I had to guess. So it's kind of one of those things where I don't want everybody to get too geeked up about it because it might still be pretty fluid.
I got to tell you, Hill Country Sooner has submitted some very good questions. I approve of all of them. I don't know why he's obsessed with J. Brent Clark, but he says, J. Brent Clark follows, I think, most of us on Twitter. He says, when they bring a kid in for a visit, do they take him by J. Brent Clark's house? Does he have like a great house or something?
There've been.
Is there an inside?
I think
joke
he's a OU historian guy.
Well, no, he's written books.
Oh, he has.
On
I
OU,
didn't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Does Carol Stoops give the recruits' mothers free Mary Kay products?
That would be interesting as they leave.
She's not. She retired from Mary Kay though.
I bet she has a closet full of old stuff.
Yeah, she's still a bigwig.
Eddie still hasn't gotten over the fact that we miss Mary Kay this year.
God, that would have been awesome.
Here's my favorite question. Does Mike Stoops pop a neck vein and get in a kid's face to see if he can handle playing for him?
It seems like something they would do on Real World or like Big Brother, and then they'd take him into the confession room and let him talk about it.
I wouldn't. It seems like that he just probably would yell and then say, yeah, that's what I was doing. That sounds good. But I mean, most people just yell because they lose control.
Do you think they would just play like Ante Jones video from the A&M game in 2000 and be like, "Can you deal with this? Like, how do you feel about this?" Like, it would be like a room, like a review board where they could actually go over and talk about how they felt about Mike Stoops' handling of Ante Jones 15 years ago.
We brought that up all the time, like when the Julian Wilson thing happened against Baylor.
Baylor's not my problem.
That Ante Jones and Mike Stoops used to scream at each other on the sideline all the time. It was no big deal. It's just how he coaches, but it's so sensitive now. It's just
maybe it's one of those things where you know how like the Warriors pitch the KD with that 3D experience. Maybe they take the recruits and let them put the 3D glasses on, and then it's just Mike yelling at them.
What would be really dumb is if they had recruits sitting there in the stadium eating barbecue and they put on 3D glasses of the stadium. That would be like a Josh Heupel type move, probably.
It sounds like something that like a 40-year-old white guy would think is really cool.
You're sitting in the stadium, dude. You don't need 3D stadium glasses. Larry Bird 69. You can just guess that 69 means he's immature. Who can do the most push-ups out of the four of you?
That's a quick out for me.
I'm done.
That's all Josh.
Oh,
I think Josh told me
once upon a
recently
time I
he
would have
just
taken
started
great pride
working
in
out.
that, but I might be winning this by default, so I don't know that that's going to be a.
I think Joe's youth would carry him.
Oh, yeah. The bones are brittle on this
I've
old
never
man.
seen a more unathletic person wearing a Oklahoma baseball national championship shirt, though.
25 guys pulling on the same rope.
Seriously, that shirt looks like it's brand new. Like, is this the first time you've ever worn that shirt from 1994?
I only break it out for special occasions, Carey.
Does it have the 25 guys pulling on the same rope on the back?
Oh, yeah, it does. It's on the back.
Heck yeah.
Turn around. I want to see it.
All right, here.
It's so awesome.
I haven't seen that shirt in ages.
I had that shirt because I camped there for like every summer
How is
when I
that
was a
shirt
kid.
not just falling apart?
I told Joe my dad has the same shirt. It needs
That's
to be signed
impressive.
by Damon Miner and Ryan Miner and put in a glass case.
How old were you in 1994?
I believe I was 5 turning 6 in 1994.
Oh,
I was 7.
I was still in college.
I was 13.
I was a big Javier Flores fan, though. If anybody.
Oh, I loved Javi Flores.
Javi's a great dude, man.
One of my biggest days on Twitter ever was the day that he followed me.
Yeah, he
Eddie
follows
stole my
everybody.
thunder.
He's
I was so excited.
I don't know if he's a scooper. Maybe we should make him an honorary scooper.
Probably should.
All right, back to serious stuff. Brenneman 10 wants this question for you, Josh. Seeing as our current defensive tackle targets are long shots, can you please enlighten us further into the name Corey Bethley you mentioned in chat?
Yeah, Bethley's a guy from Katy, Texas. Obviously same high school as Matt Diamond. Interestingly enough, kind of a guy that's physically similar to Matt Diamond. It kind of surprises me that Oklahoma sees him as a defensive tackle, but that's, it's a question I've kind of gone back and asked a few times to make sure that I'm hearing it right, and that's absolutely what I understand, is that they see him as a defensive tackle in their scheme. Now, he's a guy very different from maybe I guess I shouldn't say very different. Similar to Matt Romar in the fact that he is a very athletic defensive tackle. I think people forget how big Matt is. Matt was a running back in high school, did a lot of stuff for Port Arthur Memorial, and while Bethley is certainly not playing running back at a place like Katy, he is a very quick twitch, very athletic guy, probably about 6'1.5", probably 265, 270. So kind of a tweener as far as where he would play in OU scheme, but they see him as a defensive tackle. I think they would have to do some things a little differently, maybe have a little bit different focus if he is going to end up being their guy. But I mean, clearly, I certainly don't mean any offense to him. That's not what Oklahoma wants to happen. They want a defensive tackle out of Houston, but it's not him. So I think he clearly is the backup plan, and he's certainly not a bad one. I mean, he's a guy that's got a lot of good offers, has a lot of opportunities. But I think Oklahoma right now is really pushing for Marvin Wilson and feels like they've got a very realistic chance at him right now.
Josh, how much of that is just being at a school like Katy? I mean, Oklahoma, just if they land him, then you landed somebody from Katy and you keep that pipeline going. Is that kind of part of the process there?
I think that it definitely plays a role because, I mean, if you look at it and you say, okay, we really like this guy from Katy, but equally we like this guy from, Missouri City. Well, sure, there's going to be another guy from Missouri City at some point. At Katy, they've got one of the best sophomore running backs in the country, a guy named Glass that's a big-time guy that I can almost guarantee you OU will be recruiting in a couple of years. So with that, you kind of get a continuation, and you get to, you're going to choose that guy at the more familiar school, at the school that's going to have more talent continuing to come along because you get to continue that relationship, and you already have an existing relationship. When you go to Katy and they say, this guy, he's better than Diamond, or he's not as good as Diamond, or he's a little more athletic, whatever the verdict may be from that coaching staff, it's coming from a place of true comparison rather than, well, our guy's better than that guy you signed from our rival 2 years ago, whatever the case may be. So, like I said, I think that's something that is always going to be a part of it. It's why you see so often guys at schools like DeSoto and Cedar Hill and all that continue to be recruited when there's probably just as good a player 10 miles down the road at a school that maybe produces, one guy every 5 or 6 years.
Katy has a good running back on the way up. It seems
shocking. Yeah. I know.
Doesn't Anderson have a little brother too?
Yeah, he committed to Arkansas.
Oh, that's right.
I saw him out at 7-on-7. He looks like Rodney. Like if you just saw him I don't know, standing behind a very, very tall counter, you would think, oh, hey, that looks like Rodney's little brother. And then, he steps away from that counter and you realize he's 6'5" and 230 pounds. And Rodney's a big guy, but his brother is huge.
Someone wants to know, Bear Claw 172, of course. If a tree fell in the woods, would anyone hear Eddie Ratto scream when he fell out? He misspelled here. I guess it's because you're always hiding behind shrubbery and bushes and stuff. That's what he's alluding to.
You're a bush guy, Eddie. You're not a tree guy.
Yeah.
Did you climb a tree as a kid?
No, that's one thing I could never do is climb a tree. I couldn't even do that, the rope day.
Sammy B climbed a tree or two back in the day.
He might have, yeah. The worst day in PE was the rope day when you had to climb a rope up That and the running the mile was terrible.
Why were you in PE? Why weren't you just in a real sport?
This is like in 5th grade. PE was like a part of a class.
Yeah, elementary school, that's what they do.
Yeah.
PE
I only had PE, and I'm with Eddie. The rope day sucked. The rope
That
day was
must have been
awful.
the hippie liberals that made that after I was out of grade school.
You never had PE and like the big what was it? It was like the big balloon or whatever, and you sat underneath
Like
it.
the big tent that you got underneath? Oh, yeah, that was a great day.
That was before Play 60. I mean, we were pre Play 60 kind of kids.
I always liked anything where you could throw and hit anybody. I mean, any kind of version of dodgeball, sprout ball, anything like that where you could throw and hit somebody. That would be my jam. What was the question again? I feel like, what was it? If Eddie fell out of a tree?
Would anyone hear him
Scream.
No.
I don't feel like Eddie would scream.
I don't
if
think
he fell out
Eddie's
of
a
truck.
screamer.
Yeah, no. He'd play it cool.
I just wouldn't fall out of a tree. How about that, Bear Claw?
No, hey, we know that's not where Joe. It was in Atlanta. Eddie screamed about something out there.
No, the
Remember
tree would
something
fall.
startled
You
him
would
and
be
he
in it.
Yelled, and it freaked me out.
Oh, that was at the Braves game.
What was that at the Braves game?
I was getting in the pitcher's head.
Oh, yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
God, you're one of those people.
We were sitting in like the outfield too.
It's the Cubs game. The Cubs gets Eddie a little amped up.
All right, let's talk about the guys that have committed recently. Let's start off with Marquise Hayes, a guy that we all saw out in Kansas City for the first time. It wasn't a really good collection of either offensive or defensive linemen, but I think we all came out of it saying, I think that kid's pretty good. And then he goes to 5-star, and you're like, okay, this kid's really good. So it looks like OU got a really good offensive lineman. Josh, let's start with you.
Yeah, and I think we're all kind of in the same boat on this deal because we all went up to Kansas City expecting to see like Bray Walker and half a dozen other guys, and it really looked like when that camp broke, it was going to be a dud for us. I mean, there wasn't a lot of guys that we came in thinking, okay, that's a guy we want to watch. Levi Draper had a pulled muscle the day before, so that camp had the feeling of a disappointment. And then we went up to watch one-on-ones in the offensive lineman, and there's just this guy that's killing people. And you're looking at him, and you're like, man, he's got some bad weight. He's a little sloppy, but at the same time, he's moving his feet. There's stuff you like.
Got long arms.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where, like, the more you watched him, the less you cared about the fact that, yeah, he's going to have to lose 10 or 15 pounds. I mean, and that's okay. That's no big deal. And he's athletic enough to move around. And the thing that sticks out to me, both when I saw him in Kansas City and when I saw him in Atlanta, he is so violent with his hands. Like when he hits a guy, like I don't care if it was Marvin Wilson in Atlanta or some pass rush D end, that was trying to work him as a tackle in Kansas City. Those guys were getting knocked off balance. I mean, it's not just like, he stunned them. They were going through a pass rush move, and then it was like, okay, I got to rethink this whole thing. He's really, really strong with his hands. And when he punches, and you think about a guy that hasn't even been into a college weight program, that's going to be something that Bill Bedenbaugh's going to love to kind of run behind him and let him just run over interior linemen.
Yeah, and one of the things that's kind of shocking about Marquise that you hit the nail on the head with is if you talk to him and around him, he's a really quiet, soft-spoken guy, very humble. Doesn't seem to be, like an angry kind of, I don't know, not angry, but doesn't seem to be a very boisterous kind of person. But when he starts blocking,
he's not a jerk.
He's not a jerk, basically. He's a very nice guy, but he's just very quiet and humble. And then once he gets out there and starts blocking, he's ferocious, exploding out of his base with his arms. And he watching his tape too, he'll knock guys on their butts continually. Like he's not just going to get in your way. He's not one of those guys. He'll move his feet and get in front of you, then knock you on your ass. And so I think that's something that Oklahoma fans and Bill Bedenbaugh especially are going to thrive on and love. I think he's going to fit in very, very well in the culture in Norman.
In recent memory, Josh, can you think of a guy that benefited more from going to the rivals camps? I mean, it seems like nobody knew about him in Kansas City. He wins the MVP at the offensive line MVP, and then after that, it was like he was picking up offers every other day from the who's who of
Kansas State
college
was
football.
maybe his first big offer.
And it was like
right after the Kansas City camp.
And then it was just all downhill. And it seemed like by the time he got to Atlanta for the 5-star, I mean, he had offers from just about everybody.
I I think I would be wrong if I didn't mention the guy that's coming to or he's coming to mind for me. But the sad part is I don't know the dude's name. And it's a guy that our guy Rob Cassidy and I always joke around about. Was this tight end kind of fullback H-back guy that showed up to the Houston Rivals camp a few years ago, and nobody knew about him. And it was kind of the same deal. Like, I looked at him, and he's probably 6'3", 250, and you're kind of like, he just looked like a guy. It didn't look like anything you would talk about. And as I'm sitting there with Rob and we're sitting in midfield and we're watching, some wide receiver DB one-on-ones, this guy's just tearing it up. And so, you keep watching him and you're like, no way. He can't beat this guy. Well, then he beats that guy. And it just goes on for like 20 minutes. That guy came into the camp with absolutely no offers, and I don't even think had a Rivals profile at that point. And ended up signing, I believe, with Nebraska, and had I think probably 20 offers by the time he signed. And I don't want to say it was because of I don't want to get into that whole thing, but at the same time, there's no question that the guy benefited from from Rivals. But Marquise Hayes even talked about it when he did the commitment story. I was asking him, I said, "How much do you feel like going to that camp in Kansas City changed things for you?" And he said, it's a ton. He goes, Oklahoma literally got in touch with me later that day after the camp, and OU was on my high school campus the next day. And really from there, it just grew. We talked, Eddie, you and I and Joe talked to him in Atlanta, and he was still kind of like, I don't know. But then when I think some people around the program had a chance to see what he was doing against Marvin Wilson and Greg Rogers and all these defensive linemen that OU really likes, that at some point you just can't ignore what the guy's doing.
Josh, this is old man Josh. I heard you coughing. Are you okay?
I am good. I live with a 2-year-old, man, that goes to daycare. I live with a human petri dish that just brings sickness home for me.
Well, she will grow up to be ungrateful. Just telling you now.
I would love to play a game with Josh just to ask him things and to see how old he is. Like, do you know who Cara Delevingne is? Like, do stuff like that. Do you know what on fleek means? And see how old Josh is.
Joe's getting weird again.
What's he saying?
I don't like that kid.
The first name, I have no idea who that is.
There
I
it
have
is.
none. It's funny because before we did this, I was actually at the gym and there was somebody on the screen and I'm looking at it. And I'm like, man, that's a really cheaply produced video. I remember back in the 80s and 90s when they put some money into video. I'm like, oh, God, I'm getting really old. Like, it was the exact thing I can imagine my dad saying, like, when he listened to my music back in the 90s, like, that Kurt Cobain, he's no Eddie Van Halen. Like, stop talking. So I'm old. There's just no two ways about it.
Josh, let's talk about this Cedarian Lamb kid. Stop being a turncoat. Finally made his way back to Norman.
Why is old man Josh, like, it seems like old man Josh has an OU agenda. Like, is that something you predict coming back into my world? Is like, I'm gonna be, that OU fanboy guy? Is that what's gonna happen to me?
Tell him your true feelings, Josh. Don't hide them.
No, with Darian Lamb, when he decommitted, and he talked a lot about it, and it's something I've mentioned in a couple of the articles and things we've done. He kind of was rubbed a little bit the wrong way that so many people just assumed he was out for OU, that wasn't going to be an option for him anymore. And talking to him, you get the feeling that was never the case, that he always felt like he would probably end up back at Oklahoma. Now, to me, the school that I think he always wanted to really consider was, as most people know, LSU, and that just never really came to pass. I think LSU was looking in some different directions, so that made it a little easier for him and probably a little easier for him to say that. But at the same time, I mean, he's a guy that really likes Dennis Simmons. That's a really – and as far as guys that I don't know that get enough credit as recruiters, Simmons is one of them. I mean, people forget – he turned the tide with Bryce Youngquist. Even though that didn't work out for OU, you can't put that on Simmons. That had nothing to do with him. So I think he's one of those guys that really does a good job building relationships, and he never wavered. He didn't get upset. I think, and we've talked about this on some previous podcasts, Oklahoma over the last 2 or 3 years has become so much better in tune with the way recruiting works today. These kids are going to keep taking visits. They're going to keep talking to other schools. You can't treat them like they're disloyal for doing it. I mean, that's just not going to land you commitments. That's not the way to go about things. So I think Oklahoma did a really good job of not being upset about it, not letting it get them worked up. Just, okay, well, we're going to go back to this. We're going to try to reel him back in. And now they've got a guy that, in my conversations with people, they think is as good as just about any receiver in the country. There is a very, very high opinion of Sedarian Lamb around Oklahoma.
You know, and once again, we talked about this before, but that's another example of this staff kind of just being calm about the recruiting process and being more patient with kids, unlike was it the receiver coach for Texas A&M that went off on
Aaron Moorhead, former Indianapolis Colt,
went off on Tate Martell.
It wasn't about Tate Martell. You didn't read his subsequent tweets. I mean, he clearly was talking about something else altogether.
But I mean, it was a good read on the situation, and they I'll admit, I think we would all say staffs in the past would not have handled that as well, and they probably would have burned bridges and not made it possible for him to come back to Oklahoma.
Oh, I think that's absolutely the case. I know you go years back, and that sort of stuff you would hear from players that said, I wish Oklahoma would have been an option for me come signing day, but they just shut the door after that whole thing went down. So I think Oklahoma did a very good job of reading what that was and kind of figuring out how to handle and navigate that situation.
What are other examples even of guys that have committed, decommitted, and then recommitted? I mean, Ryan Broyles is somebody that kind of comes to mind, his jumping back and forth between OSU and OU, but
Corey Nelson was that way, but that was up to signing day.
I mean, it's only a couple, and those couple examples are always right at signing day. This is an unusual kind of scenario, and like Josh said, you have to give kudos to the coaches. I mean, this is uncharted waters to get a guy to come back this soon on board, and they must have done a great job of maintaining relationships afterwards. And
the only other one I can come up with is a very direct and recent one's Parrish Cobb. I mean, that's another one that, and you even heard rumors that maybe that didn't go that smoothly. So, you kind of wonder if it's all about situational. And obviously Oklahoma probably thought that bridge was already burned and, whatever. But with Lamb, they knew they had time and they handled it well.
I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on we're pretty familiar with these guys, Oklahoma's wide receiver commits now, 3 4-stars, and you can even throw Calcaterra in there. Where would you rank these guys in terms of their ability to be playmakers for OU at the next level? I mean, you have Rambo, who's the highest ranked of them all. I think we're all huge fans of Jalen Rieger. And then Sedarian Lamb might be the best of them all. So what are your guys' opinion on that?
Well, for me, I think Lamb is a little notch above the rest. I think people it's hard when you see him on tape and the way he moves to understand that Sedarian Lamb's 6'3". I mean, that's a big kid moving in a way that a lot of slots can't do. To me, he's a guy that unless, guys like A.D. Miller and Dahu Green and Jeff Mead, and some of these kind of peripheral guys really step up and just make themselves firm parts of the offense this year, it's going to be almost impossible to keep Lamb off the field next year. Rager's another guy just because I think, there's going to be a clear opening at slot for them to get another guy out there. I think he clearly can help. I think Rambo will probably need a little time. He's very lean, and he's not a guy that's going to overwhelm you with speed or any, he's a very good route runner, and I think that will help him. But at the same time, he's a guy that physically could use some time to develop. And Calcaterra, it's just a matter of can he handle the blocking that he'll need to do, even in a minimized role in the way Oklahoma uses their tight ends.
Okay, somebody wanted me to explain why I tweeted out something about Jarvis Baxter the other day.
That is the hottest of the hottest tweets ever, too, by the way, Carey. I meant to say something. That's like the hottest sports opinion of all time. I was
Twitter. Watching the OU Tennessee game that was on, and I don't know why I was watching it because that's like the only game I have DVR'd from last year besides the Baylor game. But it was, going into the offense was just terrible for 3 quarters. And I'm sitting there and like, okay, everybody in this game that's contributing, Deron Neal, Sterling Shepard, they're gone. And there was such an issue getting the passing game going a year ago. And to me, it just makes perfect sense. Like Jarvis Baxter, I know he's not great. I mean, he's not a superstar. But he's now been working with Baker Mayfield for 2.5 years, 3 years really, or 2 years, and he has proven that he can be reliable. And I'm not saying that. I guess you can look at it as kind of a dig at Zach Farrar and Michael Jones or whatever, but I think Michael Jones will be a guy that plays a lot next year. But outside of Mark Andrews and D.D. Westbrook, Jarvis Baxter is the only guy that's out there that has experience that Baker Mayfield relies upon. And I'm not, maybe A.D. Miller becomes a total stud. I'd say that is not likely. I'd say what is most likely is for Jarvis Baxter to basically become the either second or third option for Baker Mayfield most of the year.
Yeah, I would imagine A.D. Miller, if I had to pick, would be that guy. But you're right, Carey. If you're gonna,
but he's an outside guy, and he's running a lot of just deep routes. He's not a possession guy for Baker Mayfield. And let's face it, this isn't dink and dunk, but it is still a possession offense.
And maybe Mark Andrews will kind of feed into that role more. But I wonder how many receivers are going to see the field routinely for Oklahoma when you have Mark Andrews out there, Joe Mixon, Samaje Perine, who they've shown they've loved to have them both on the field at the same time, and D.D. Westbrook. There's four guys right there that are going to eat up a lot of your plays. And if you ever bring in an extra blocking tight end or Dimitri Flowers, you're not even going to really need a second receiver a lot of times.
And I was really talking about other receivers in the Stoops era, Ryan Broyles when he was young and he had Malcolm Kelly and Jermaine Gresham out there on the field, and Manny Johnson, Joaquin Iglesias. He was the up and comer, but he became the star, and there really wasn't a second guy for Ryan Broyles when he was here. Joaquin Iglesias really was that really good option to Malcolm Kelly as a receiver. He was a good receiver. I was just saying Jarvis Baxter is probably going to be a guy like that.
He's still the third leading receiver that's returning. He had more catches than Mark Andrews last year. He had 20 receptions. So talking with Baker at Big 12 Media Day, I posted something on the board about this, and that he's a guy that he really feels like kind of rededicated himself over the offseason. Yeah. He knows that he had a bad year last year.
Well, and here's the thing. Here's who it's bad for. It's bad for Geno Lewis. Yeah. Because not one person has told me, Geno Lewis is really he's going to improve this pass. No, nobody has said anything about Geno Lewis standing out at any point. Even back in the spring, just he looks really good. How's he looking?
Yeah.
Oh, he's doing okay.
Solid, yeah.
Nick Bascanes he talked more about than Geno Lewis.
Basquine.
It's Basquine. I think Basquine. He got talked up at Big 12 Media Days. I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah, no walk-on has ever come out of the spring and just been a star. I mean, people thought Carter Whitson was going to be that guy. People thought Jermaine Hardison was going to be that guy. It never happens. Of course, I did the same thing with Dom Whaley, went on my rants about, he's never going to play. But they don't suck as bad at receiver as they did at running back then.
That was during the dark ages.
He was actually pretty good until he almost had his leg torn off at Kansas State.
Was that at K-State? I was trying to think when that was.
Yeah, that run he had at Texas. I mean, that was he looked like he was moving faster than anybody in the Texas secondary, and that had a lot of NFL guys on it.
So it's logic that Jarvis Baxter is the guy that's going to emerge, outside of D.D. Westbrook and Mark Andrews. It could be A.D. Miller. I don't think it'll be Dahu Green, but it's what it is. It's Jarvis Baxter.
What you're saying is, Mark Clayton had Brandon Jones out there. There were times when Sterling Shepard had LaColt
Brandon
Bester.
Jones is not a bad
Jalen Saunders, somebody to.
I would say Jalen Saunders is a step ahead of what I think Jarvis Baxter will be next year, but very similar to a Jalen Saunders type receiver, I think.
If you could get that out of him, I think that if you ask Lincoln Riley if he could get that right now, he'd take it.
Were people just mad because they're like, how dare we have better players than Jarvis Baxter? Was that kind of
I think it's just because it's not a sexy name. It's not a name like a Michael Jones or a whoever. It's just not.
Look, I think Michael Jones will have a much better career than Jarvis Baxter will, but he's a true freshman, and the chances of him just starring immediately are slim to none.
I buy it. I like what Jarvis Baxter's bringing in. I think somebody asked in the chat the other day who has a better year, him or Michael Jones, and I said the exact same as you, that Jones, long run, long term of things, going to have probably a better career, but if you're asking me who's going to have a better year next year, I think I'd go with Jarvis.
I mean, it's one of those things where they probably make it up in the aggregate. I mean, they've talked about at media days so many times. Baker Mayfield said that they're just going to bring out a ton of receivers and spread the ball around. And I mean, they'll have a bunch of guys get 10 to 30 catches and a few hundred yards, I think, outside of the main few. Jarvis Baxter will be one of them. Michael Jones will be one of them. And I think it's just a matter about who's going to be trusted on at the end of the year to be out there to make a key catch. And it's hard to argue against Jarvis Baxter, someone that would earn that trust over a true freshman.
All right, I want to hit on one more thing, which is since nobody can talk back and we can't get into discussion, I think we should. I think Joe Mixon discussion is perfect for the podcast because we don't have to deal with comments and stuff like that. But Josh, anything recruiting wise you wanted to hit on before we got out of here that we haven't discussed already?
No, like I said, I mean, I feel it's almost daunting to follow up even the mention of Joe Mixon and then try to be like, oh, yeah, they've got this little bit of recruiting news to talk about. No, I mean, the barbecue and obviously the two recent commitments, I think, like we talked about, Xavier Newman's a good possibility. And there's a few other guys that I think people should keep an eye on this weekend. But for the most part, I mean, I think we've covered the bases. So
everybody's going to want to know with Jeff Okudah, but I think you've explained that pretty well on the board. But if you want to just go over that one more time.
With Okudah, I mean, there's a possibility he does come up. That definitely hasn't been ruled out. I think it's.
And is that because Robert just keeps working on him?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. I mean, he's one of those guys that and that's Robert Barnes is the kind of guy that I think if Jeff called him and like Robert was hanging out at the pool with his buddies and Jeff was like, hey, man, I kind of wanted to go to OU today, Robert probably rally the troops and get, a ride going for Jeff Okudah back up to OU. So, I mean, Robert is completely willing to kind of step over and do everything he needs to help OU get Jeff Okudah. So it's still definitely a possibility that he comes. When it's this late in the game and nothing's been finalized, to me, that's usually not a good sign. But we'll see. I mean, we'll be checking with people as the barbecue's going on and seeing who does and doesn't make it. And I can guarantee you there'll be a few guys that are not on that list that end up making it in, and maybe Jeff Okudah is one of those guys.
Are we talking Shashan high on your list of might not be the biggest surprise, but, would be a surprise?
He would be a big surprise to me. Everybody I've talked to, there was kind of that initial buzz that maybe he was going to come. And talking to a few people, I don't think there's a lot of expectation that he would show up. One of the guys that I think might be interesting and might be a possibility, and I'd actually heard that I might find out today, is on Dario Robinson, the defensive end from Hutto, Texas. He's a guy that I expect to be at OU in the next week to 10 days. Now, it may not be for the barbecue, but it still could be. So he's a guy that I would keep an eye on.
And one guy we didn't talk about that was commit Trey Sermon. I mean, I got to imagine that's huge for him to have him here just to be around all these commits.
Oh, of course. I mean, because, that's now that they're going back into the season and you assume that Trey Sermon's going to be healthy after kind of a nicked up junior year. If he goes out and puts 2 or 3 good games on film, some of those schools that maybe cooled on him a little bit, you can guarantee they're going to jump right back on him. Home state Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, all those traditional powers that recruit Georgia every year and, land multiple guys out of that state are going to be right back there knocking on his door. So for Oklahoma to kind of have this chance to kind of remind him of, this is why you chose OU, this is why you're excited about OU. What I'm interested to see following that with him is, do you then set him up for that Ohio State visit weekend where there's going to be a ton of guys there? Or do you wait until later in the game, like, maybe the banquet weekend in December or something like that, where you kind of have a chance to get that last big blow in before signing day? So that'll be interesting to watch with Trey Sermon. But, yeah, this is a big weekend for them to just kind of reaffirm what he was already believing.
It doesn't hurt that all those 2019 Georgia guys are coming as well, and they'll see Sermon there and see that it's, visualize that, okay, I can go from Georgia to Oklahoma. That's a possibility.
Let me ask you about Kobe Boyce coming in. I mean, what can Oklahoma get out of that? Because, I mean, you see today he's tweeting, hinting at, another Texas commitment. He seems like he's pretty full on the Longhorn train.
That's the way it feels to me, and honestly, Joe could probably talk more about this. He's really talked to Kobe a lot more than I have. But from kind of what I hear from the OU side of things is he's receptive to what they've got to say. He doesn't sound like a guy that's dead set on, Texas is my only option. That's all that I'm going to do. And if he comes up this weekend and really gives OU that legitimate look, I don't expect a commitment. I don't expect anything to change like that, but it could really start to turn the tide for him.
Yeah, I mean, Kobe's somebody I've talked to a few times, and I mean, he's out there tweeting today, that Texas is going to get big news.
Watch out for a cow.
But I mean, I'm talking to him. I sent him a message and said, "Hey, you still good to come to the barbecue this weekend?" And he said, "Yes, sir. That's the plan." So I mean, he's planning to go to OU and excited about it, while also being excited about Texas commits. I mean, that's a dissonance that people can recognize, and it's almost reminiscent of like when Trajan Bandy is claiming he saw OU and going to go to OU, but he's wearing Miami bracelets, visiting Miami. People can still pick up on that stuff behind the scenes. I don't care how much you put it out there on Twitter. People can tell that he's very much considering Oklahoma. He's told me before that he probably would have it Texas 1, OU 2, and then everybody else the rest of the way. So he's clearly keeping OU in mind. I mean, at the very least, that's what he's doing. He's keeping them there as an option in case Texas falls through.
Just to fill in the blank on the big thing that he was alluding to on Twitter was Josh Thompson.
Watch out for the cow.
Wait, what are you talking about? Cow?
It's about Kobe Boyce. He did the eyes and then a cow.
Oh, did he?
I mean, it was obviously watch out
the
Longhorns.
emojis. Yeah. The emoji.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they got a commitment from. They flipped Josh Thompson from TCU to Texas. 3-star cornerback out of Nacogdoches was, I think, what he was hitting at.
Where was he committed?
TCU, is that what?
TCU's my problem.
Very much your
Thank
problem,
you, Gary.
Coach Patterson. Maybe one of the best sound bites to come out of Big 12 Media Day, by the way.
I enjoy it very much. All right, let me just say this. Joe Mixon, I know there's all kinds of back and forth. And I got on some threads. I'm going to say this first. The urban legend stuff that keeps coming up, I don't care. You guys do whatever you want. I'm not trying to chastise the fans. I'm just trying to give you the facts. First things first, there was never anything in the police report or any accusations of racial slurs or spitting. Neither one of the... I don't know how that's become urban legend. It comes up everywhere. Stop repeating that crap because it's not true. And I even talked to people in Mixon's camp, and they said a racial slur was never used, and there was never any spitting. So, that's back in the days when they would talk to me, and I really haven't messed with it because every time we bring it up, it's just a train wreck, and I don't want to deal with it. So, I don't know why I'm dealing with it now. So, look, you guys know I have not been defending Joe Mixon on this deal. I feel dirty kind of having to ask to interview him all the time when they say no. The thing at the Orange Bowl that happened was just a train wreck. I didn't want to be a part of it, and I had to be. So it's not like I feel great about Joe Mixon, and I'm a supporter of Joe Mixon. I'm not, but I'll say this. After seeing all this stuff come out with her filing civil suits against not just him, but Pickleman's, it's a money grab.
It's turned into a disaster.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, this no one should feel good about any of this stuff. I'm going to say this too. Pickleman's has some nice pizzas. I would hate to lose them on Campus Corner. But suing Pickleman's, I mean, you saw the video, Eddie.
Yeah.
Tell me if you remember this, because I was talking about this on the board today. She comes in and puts her hands down on the table, and she looks like she's just exasperated, like with something is bugging her, and she's being very drama queen about it. And she waves someone towards her.
Correct.
And then Joe shows up in the frame and standing there next to her, and they start talking, and it doesn't really look like they're fighting.
No,
they're having some kind of a discussion.
That's the most shocking thing is the escalation of everything that happens, and then it's just, I mean,
like you could tell they were speaking before, but to sit there and say, "I'm suing Pickleman's for $75,000 because they didn't have a security," you're the one who waved him into the store, and said, "Let's talk about this."
There's just so much, I think, that everybody doesn't understand that hasn't seen the video, that doesn't understand that the only 3 people in this restaurant are him. I went in thinking it was going to be
there was a couple that we didn't know. We found out later there was one other couple at the front.
Maybe like
it wasn't the very front table that they were at. It was like 2 rows back.
Right.
And so it was her obviously gay friend, her and Joe all around this table.
Right.
And he was just going to leave. Like you could tell they talked. It was probably I don't know. I mean, maybe he thought they were going to hook up or something. It was his birthday. I don't know. But he started to leave, and he turns to her friend, and he says something very angrily at him. And
He's walking out.
Yeah, and that's when she flips out.
Yeah.
And rushes towards him and pushes him, which doesn't do anything to him. Then he fake punches. But, I mean, the whole thing about Pickleman's is at fault. I mean, please.
That's ridiculous. The situation.
And it just makes the whole thing, from what I know of it, it makes it more of a circus and more ridiculous and makes me need to go take a shower again.
Well, and it's now turned into a thing that leads your nightly news. The news reporters and stuff are on it rather than it's kind of come out of the sports realm of things. This is a news story now.
Here's what I would do if I were Pickleman's. I would leak that damn video.
Heck yeah.
She doesn't want the video.
Sell it to TMZ.
And look, I'll tell you this. That was another thing, like, you know.
Or SoonerScoop.
I'm not trying to rip on anybody. There were some student reporters that said, a source says that she wants the video. That's not true at all. They don't want the video out. Because
why would she?
They don't want to do anything to damage Joe Mixon or his potential value in the future until they can get what they can get out of him.
Yeah.
So they don't want the NFL being like, oh, did you see that video? They want to keep this all sealed and go through the court process and have it where nobody ever sees it, except the people that decide how much money she's going to get.
The number one question I've gotten about all this with the recent lawsuit and everything, Carey, is what happens now? I mean, I think people are worried about Mixon not playing this year, being punished more.
He won't be.
Okay, exactly. And
I will tell you this. I did talk to somebody around Big 12, and I talked to Bob, about his whole situation, the fact that, it's 2 years from now, and you still got a question in your press conference today, like, does that bother you? Or and I said, did you expect that to for it to be like this, where people are still asking you about it? He said, yeah, we expected this. We made the decision. We knew when we made the decision that as long as, maybe even after, Joe's here, I'm going to get asked about it, why he's here, why I didn't kick him off the team. He said we were ready for that stuff. And I did talk to somebody else after that told me that if this situation happens again at OU, because of everything that's gone on, that person wouldn't be on the team anymore. Because, not just because they've gone through it with Joe, but the climate is such that the Ray Rice thing happened, the Joe Mixon thing happened, Mississippi State thing, that guy got charged today with a misdemeanor. Mm-hmm. He's only going to have one game. Oh, trust me, OU people are just snickering and laughing at that. They think it's a joke. But if it did happen today, Bob Stoops would not keep a player on the team if he was caught or charged with striking a woman.
Well, if you look back at that, guys, how different does that get handled if that maybe happened a month after it did? The Ray Rice thing broke.
It was all breaking at the same time. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you had, and to me, what I thought was always interesting back then was OU had just taken Dorial Green Beckham, who'd had his situation at Missouri. And how do you boot the young kid when you took in the other kid? I mean, like it was a really interesting dynamic. And I thought OU got put in a tough spot. But when this, when the Molitor story ran with Barry Trammell, I guess about last week, everybody kind of got all up in arms again. And I thought, well, what's all this excitement? I don't like, if you want to say that you didn't like the punishment from the beginning, okay, that's fine. I understand that. But trying to act like, you should have done something more now, nothing changed. Nothing's been any different for OU to handle anything differently. I don't know why they would change their punishment now just because the girl spoke out.
Well, and I asked Barry Trammell that on the air. We were doing the morning animals from Dallas. Barry came over. We were talking about it, and that kind of rubbed me the wrong way too. That you seek out the newspaper to tell your side of the story now, like right before you get ready to launch these civil lawsuits against everybody. And I said, Barry, you knew what was going on. You knew what they were doing. They were trying to use the media. Did it ever cross your mind, like, maybe we shouldn't do this? And he said that it came up in the newsroom, but Amelia Molitor's sitting there in a chair and she wants to tell her story. I'm going to write that article, which I think most people probably would have.
Yeah, I mean,
not us, because I didn't want the headache.
Oh, my.
I mean, if you have her telling the story, I understand the reasoning behind it. To me, the whole thing is, if you ignore the whole incident, and I mean, not ignore it, but let's move past that and just focus on people saying, all right, now with all this new Baylor information, the Ray Rice thing, what does Oklahoma do now? If they release the video, what does Oklahoma do now? Those questions are nonsensical to me. OU did what they did, and they're sticking by it, and nothing's going to change. If they changed any sort of punishment now, it would make them look worse.
Right.
Not better.
No, they're not going to change anything. They'll take the heat if it comes out, but they're not going to change. And the bad thing for Oklahoma is, like, Bob Stoops can't come out and say, well, look at what we did compared to what other people are doing, because he's in a no-win situation that way. He can't say, we punished him for a year. Mississippi State only punished their guy for a game. You look terrible if you say that.
And what game was it? I think isn't Mississippi State playing like?
Oh, it's East Popcorn State.
Yeah, it's like Alcorn State or some crazy thing like that. Like it's nobody. It's not even. It doesn't even matter.
How bad is that blowback going to be when the video comes out, Carey? In my opinion, it's going to be pretty awful. There's going to be people calling for Bob Stoops, David Bourne, and Joe Castiglione's jobs.
Yeah. Well, maybe at that point you have to point out, what happened at Mississippi State. I mean, all Bob Stoops is going to do is just say, look, we saw this. We took him out of our program for a year. And the only thing he had was academics. That was the problem that I had with him showing up to stuff, is it made, Bob Stoops and the administration look bad.
Yeah.
For a kid that had already basically put everybody's jobs in jeopardy.
Yeah, and then he just starts showing up to that open practice and stuff like that.
And people are getting mad at us for pointing it out or whatever. I'm like, look, control this kid. I mean, it's your job on the line, not mine. I'm actually mad at him for you.
Yeah, it was really, really bad. And then I think they got a handle on it. He stopped showing up to things. You stopped seeing him. There for a while, people were wondering if he was still even in school.
You remember he went to the spring game that one year and was in the crowd and taking selfies with everybody, and you're just like, dude, just chill out.
Yeah. He had a lot of growing up to do, obviously. I mean,
I think he still does.
Yeah. He probably does. There's a lot of things that you see going back to his first media appearance down in Miami and how big of a disaster that was. You could have saved yourself a lot of trouble without showing up and putting yourself on Periscope and taking a selfie with reporters before the first time you start talking to people. I mean, it's just, there's a certain way to act and a certain way to carry yourself, and he probably has a little bit better.
People wanted to see a certain, here was the problem with everything that happened last year. People wanted to see a certain amount of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Contrition?
Contrition, exactly. People wanted to hear him say, I'm sorry this ever happened. Yeah. I shouldn't even be here anymore. And the coaches gave me a second chance, and I'm not going to let them down, and I'm not going to embarrass them again. But instead, what people heard was, I'm not taking any questions about the incident. And that was the other mistake. And if OU could redo it again, they would have coached him up better to just say, at the advice of my lawyers, I can't talk about that right now. And he never said, at the advice of my lawyers.
Don't give half answers and then trail off.
I'm not convinced. I think the Oklahoma communications team might have known that, but they just don't. I don't think they ever could get him to be trustworthy to say something like that. I don't think I think they literally did not trust him to be able to handle something like that, and so that's why he wasn't seen nor heard from. And to be honest, he's still not really seen nor heard from. So,
and Bob was asked if he'll talk this year at Media Day, and he said he didn't know, which means no.
Yeah,
I mean, until these civil cases are over, his lawyers don't want him talking. That's the problem.
And we've all kind of dealt with him a little bit. And I remember Josh even saying this kind of out of his recruitment. He doesn't strike you as someone who's angry or a bad kid or any of these things.
He doesn't.
He just strikes you as a kid. He strikes you as someone who's very, very young.
He was the typical 5-star guy. He would beg all of us to help him get followers on Twitter. He was, he smiled all the time. Seems like everybody liked him, got along. It was shocking when it happened. When I saw it, I wondered, like, it bothered me because I was like, man, how could I not see that? Or how could I know a guy? How could I think a guy was such a nice kid and for, to see that happen? It bothered me.
It was
just still bothers me.
It was a year away from just seeing this kid pretty much in Chicago, or Atlanta.
No, Chicago.
No, Chicago. I mean, him and Quick, and I don't know. It's still, I guess the last thing I would say on this is just, I beg people not to take one side or the other side until they see the video and actually what happened.
It's okay to say Joe made a mistake and he should have walked away.
Yeah.
You don't have to get into this thing of, well, she spit on him and called him the N-word. It's okay to just say he made a huge mistake. He should have walked away. Hopefully he learns a lesson. And it's okay to say, well, she's a money-grubbing, whatever.
Yeah.
Not, don't use the B word. We'll delete that post. But, but I mean, she's out for a payday. It's obvious now. And he put himself in that position where she's capable of going out and getting a payday.
No way, any way that you look at it, it's a bad situation.
And it's bad because he's an 18-year-old kid. We all made mistakes when we were 18 years old. We had buddies that made mistakes. To have it haunt you the rest of your life is just, that's the tragedy to me in this whole thing.
Yeah.
For both of those kids.
It's always going to be next to him no matter what when the video does come out, because I do think that at some point it comes out.
I think the OAB will win that lawsuit because it's a clear open records situation.
And that's another thing that
the Supreme Court has basically said. They didn't say, okay, everyone can have the tape, but they basically said, your ruling was messed up on this. You need to start over.
And that's the other thing that I think people on the board, or maybe just in general, don't understand is that, yes, they probably wouldn't have pursued it if it wasn't an Oklahoma running back. But when that decision was made, and they said, and the Supreme Court or the local court said pretty much that you can't get to it, that's when it became a huge news story.
Yeah, there's certain people you don't want to tell you can't do this. I mean, you don't want to tell people you can't carry a gun or you can't have a gun. I mean, there's certain things you just can't tell people.
Yeah.
You can't vote. I mean, you have rights. If you tell people that they don't have those rights when they know they do, it always ends like this. So.
Ugly.
All right. Well, this has been, I think, our longest podcast. So, Josh, I appreciate you hanging on. Maybe.
Oh, I'm good. No, I'm still here. I could hear the tone in your voice. You're worried I had actually gone. No, I like I said, I didn't have to get the kid today, so we're golden. If you guys want to, we can talk about something else that's sure to rile people up or something.
I think we're good. I don't think people want to listen to us that long. Of course, man, that's over an hour and 20-minute podcast, so. So there you go. Longest podcast ever. When you're listening to this and we're talking about barbecue and you're bitching and moaning and saying just talk sports, just realize there's an hour and 20 minutes worth of podcast you can listen to. So for Josh McQuistion, for Eddie Radosevich, Joe Duvall, I'm Carey Murdoch. This has been the Unofficial 40 from SoonerScoop.com. Until next time, we'll see you then.